please. That would be great. Okay. Can you hear something now, Paul? Paging Paul Hagstrom. Paul Hagstrom. Hello. Better respond, Paul. I'm going to start singing a song otherwise. Excellent.
1, 2, 3. Do you hear it?
Yeah.
Everybody? Okay. I was hoping for a bigger crowd, but there's about 20 or 30 of the blue key tags that are have been turned in already. A lot of people had to leave early to get home, I guess. But
wait 1 second. Let me at least introduce you.
oh, okay.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. I want to welcome everyone to Kansas Fest 2023 Saturday. So we have 2 talks this morning, and then after that we'll have a short break, and we will have the presentations and announcements for the HackFest Awards. So our first talk this morning is Stephen Buggy, and he will be talking about the Apple IIc's enhanced EEPROM chip. So take it away, Stephen.
Oh, okay. Let's see. To introduce myself, this is the 9th time I've been to Kansas Fest. My first year was 1996, and it was at the other college, Avila College. And the most memorable thing about Avila compared to Rockhurst is that there were a fair number of complaints about the food over there. And I've not heard any complaints here at Rockhurst in the 8 years that I've been here in Rockhurst. So I guess we're glad that they moved to this campus. Let's see. Now, EEPROMs are these little chips with a window on them. Let's see, we'll see that on the next.
Right over here on the.
Oh, okay.
Move it over there for the projector.
Oh, okay, sure. Whoops, let's see. There. Whoops, let's see, okay. EEPROMs are little chips with a quartz glass clear window on them, and inside is a little lattice work of metal parts. Viewed under a microscope, it's incredible what you see. I mean, it's just amazing how much information goes into an EEPROM, and yet the technology is roughly about 40 years old. I mean, I'm sure that if you have things like iPhone and that measures memory in gigabytes, it's in even a much smaller space. But that disk that I've given everybody in this packet, when you copy the contents of the EEPROM onto a floppy disk, if it's a big EEPROM like for the 2C, it takes about 5 to 15 minutes just to scroll through all of the contents of that EEPROM. I mean, to think that there's that much information on that little metal thing inside just seems amazing. But then, of course, I marvel when you get gigabytes onto modern things. Let's see, the common sizes for EEPROMs. Now EEPROMs are used in many different technology-oriented subjects. You know, of course, for us, it's Apple II computers. The PC world in the early years used a pair of EEPROMs. I would dig them out of waste motherboard places, and it always seemed like the PCs used 2 of them. The Apple IIe, I think, used 4 of them. One of these is actually a language EEPROM because, of course, Apple IIcs were sold across many different countries. In Canada, they would want to have a French language EEPROM because the French use a lot of special punctuation characters above the letters. And so by changing that one EEPROM, it's fully compatible with French. Germany's got similar special characters above the numbers. There you can see these are those little quartz windows there. Now, so one of these was for the language for the keyboard, and the other 3 were all for general things in the 2E. The Apple IIc was introduced several years later, and the one EEPROM, the 256K EEPROM, is what does it for the 2C. All of this stuff is in that one EEPROM. Now, I don't know about foreign languages. Maybe there's another way to encode the special characters, or maybe when they sold it in France or Germany, maybe they just put a totally different EEPROM in there. EEPROMs are used in other areas too. Used EEPROMs are available on eBay, and I remember one year I bought, I think it was 24 EEPROMs that said Zeiss Optics on it. Now, Zeiss Optics is a German company, and I am sure they're ranked as #1 in the camera world. Well, Nikon would fight over that rating, but I think that Zeiss goes back even further into the past. The reason I bought them, of course, is that you can erase the EEPROMs and record other things on there. Let's see. The first number shows the capacity of that EEPROM. The bigger the number, the more capacity. Like this is the most of the ones that are shown here. Then if there is a dash with another number, that one is a relative speed number. And in general, if a device uses more than one EEPROM, it's better to have the same speed on them. We notice the same thing with Apple memory chips. You know, you don't want to mix speeds in the same computer because it's likely to get screwed up in some way. Let's see, this book I bought and I've read it, Experiments with EEPROMs. I think the book was written in the late 80s, the high point of EEPROMs. By the way, EEPROMs are still being made. I buy blank ones on eBay. It doesn't matter whether they're used or new because I can erase any of them. That'll be a topic coming up a little bit later on the pictures. About halfway through, I will report on my own experiment. I thought that if this is the main book on EEPROMs, I should do some experiment too. And the experiment that I will report is whether uranium radiation can erase EEPROMs. I'll report on that in about 5 minutes. This and the next picture have a story of their own. I started preparing this talk about 6 months ago, but I couldn't find my EEPROM chip. Dang, let's see, I thought I stuck it in here. I searched and searched and searched. I did the graphics about 6 weeks ago, and I still couldn't find it. So what I did is, in order to have something to put on a picture, I contrived this. Now, maybe you can tell the name of this is serial. That means serial processing, like the, what is it, the super serial card in the 2E. I wanted to get a card that would have dip switches on. This one has 2 rows of dip switch. Anyway, about a week before the trip, I finally found the card and I brought it. But dang, I guess I forgot to bring it down here. But anyway, it doesn't matter that I didn't bring it down here. You have the picture, a close-up picture of that EEPROM programmer card in this packet here. I did it close up so you can read everything in the picture, but this is the actual EEPROM card. And the EEPROM card can reproduce EEPROMs, make perfect copies of them. It requires many more steps than the Cadillac of EEPROM burners, which you'll see pictures of in just a few minutes. The one I call the Cadillac of EEPROM burners can do 8 of them at a time, all perfect. I've never found even one error on the copying of those EEPROMs because in addition to copying 8 at a time, it tests every chip in there. So if you load up all 8 blank slots, it takes it longer than just doing one because it actually tests everything after it's copied them. By the way, if you picked up any of those brown envelopes I put on the giveaway table today, or I think on Wednesday I put it there for the giveaway, it includes EEPROM that says KFest 2C when you put it into a 2C. It replaces Apple 2C with the word KFest 2C, so it'll keep reminding you about get signed up for next year's Kansas Fest. Let me pass this around though. This is the instruction sheet for how to fit the EEPROM into your 2C. If the 2C is already enhanced, all you got to do is pop the other EEPROM out and fit this in, and that's it. If your 2C is unenhanced, then you need to do two little soldering changes on the motherboard. So let me just pass these around. I mean, this will just give you an idea. Oh yeah, good. This will just give you an idea how much work is required. That little bit of soldering is pretty simple. I suppose it would scare some people that you have to solder the board. It's where you open up one connection, you scrape it off, and then you put a drop of solder on another different connection. But anyway, I put this one on in the pictures because I made it about 6 weeks ago. There is a big chip holder. There's a lever somewhere. Dang, I'm not sure. You see it somewhere?
Yeah, the upper right.
Oh yeah, there. Oh yeah, there's the lever thing. You lay it in. Now this one is actually one of these chip holders for 40 pins. The actual number of pins on EEPROMs is either 28 pins or 24 pins. Anyway, I did find the actual EEPROM about a week ago, so that's what's pictured here. If you count the number of blanks there, it would be 28. And there's only one row of dip switches there, but again, unless you have that 5 1/4 inch floppy, you wouldn't be able to use that card. So save this package for any future time that you come to Kansas Fest. You know, you just might find one of these things. It's labeled as EEPROM programmer. If you find one next year, then you can use the disc. So don't throw away the disc. Okay. Now this is the same picture, but with 256K EEPROM stuck in there. You notice there's a lot of empty spaces there. Let's see now, the EEPROMs can always be erased and rewritten. There's a lot of EEPROMs sold on eBay. I would say anytime you go to eBay and search for EEPROM, you'll probably see at least 50 different ads. Most of them are used, but occasionally get new ones. The prices vary tremendously, just like everything on eBay. Some people trying to get 20 bucks for one, and others selling them for maybe $2. But I'd say the average price on eBay is roughly about $4 for them. But you do have to erase them. And this kind of EEPROM eraser you can buy on eBay. It's roughly about $25. The trouble is it can only hold about 7 or 8 EEPROMs in this little small drawer in there. I added that LED light to it. By the way, the markings on this thing are wrong. This is a timer, but it's not just 6 minutes. It's more like these are tens of minutes. So when you erase it, I would say it takes a minimum of 1 hour, and most of the time I do 2 hours while erasing the chips. My own homemade eraser is much better. Oh wait, that's the inside of the thing you just saw. Notice the bluish looking light? That's what ultraviolet looks like. By the way, ultraviolet comes in many different wavelengths, and whatever is the most destructive wavelength is probably what the EEPROM burner uses. But you got to take precautions not to look at it. Of course, when I use this thing, I shut the drawer. But with the other one, I put a cloth over the whole thing with a pilot light on it. There's my homemade one, and when I say that is better than this one, I can erase about 45 EPROMs in this one. I've put sort of sticky things on all of the sides, and then I push the EPROMs onto it. You see these up here? Those are all being erased. Mostly I use this eraser rather than that one because it can do more of it at a time. I think that over the years, I think I have probably erased and re-recorded 300 to maybe 400 EPROMs. I mean, I don't really keep count of it, but it's quite a lot, especially with that Cadillac of EPROM burners that does 8 at a time. The bulb is only a 4-watt bulb. I bought the bulb in a pet store about 10 years ago when I set this up. Pet stores do it because people put this in their fish aquarium to sterilize the water in which the fishes swim. I put this Christmas bulb here on the end because I put like a dishcloth over the whole thing, and this is a reminder that the power is turned on. Okay. Let's see, here's just another picture. Looks like that bulb has been turned off. Again, you can easily see the chips in the erasing machines. It takes roughly 2 hours. Oh, what I do with the big one is I run them for about 2 hours, then I pop them all out, and then I randomly reposition them in the eraser because if the bulb is close to one of the two ends, it's not getting as much ultraviolet light as if it's in the middle part. So I figure if I erase them with one arrangement, then pop them all out, put them back in, then most of them are in a different position than the first time and more likely to be totally erased. Because of course, if the capacity of the EPROM is 256,000 bits, you want to make sure every bit has been erased. Let's see, here's that experiment that I did. Now, my other hobby is uranium and Geiger counters. My wife hassles me for occasionally. I mean, we're married 50 years as of last year, so she's mostly put up with me over the years. But she allows me to come to Kansas Fest, but she's never shown interest in traveling here. Beginning about 15 years ago, I started collecting uranium because we live close to the richest uranium field in the entire USA. It's called Jurassic Canyon near Grants, New Mexico, 60 miles away. And the uranium was deposited there in the ground about 200 million years ago when this area was full of dinosaurs. The Mount Taylor extinct volcano right next to the uranium field 200 million years ago was spewing uranium from the center of the Earth. And it is the richest uranium field that has already been mined. So I've been out there about 35 times, multi-day trips. Also, I always try to get people to come with me because about the only risk there is rattlesnakes. I've never been bit by rattlesnake. I've only seen one. 2 other people with me have seen 2. Anyway, what I did is I wanted to see whether uranium can erase the EPROM chips. This is a rock with 94,000 counts per minute on that spot. Now I moved these things as close to that spot as I could. I tested them for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours about a month ago. No erasure whatsoever. So a couple days before coming to Kansas Fest, I used the most radioactive rock I have ever found, 186,000 counts per minute. And I tested it in the same way, 186,000, that is very high radiation. I mean, high radiation is 40,000 and up. So even 90 some is pretty high, but 186, the highest I would ever find, I think. I tested them with this more powerful rock for 1 hour, 2 hours, and 9 hours. Overnight was the 9-hour measurement. Again, absolutely no erasure of the chips. So the conclusion is radiation does not erase the EEPROM. By the way, this is the best Geiger counter company in the country. I've been there about 3 years ago for a 2-hour tour. Ludlam, every component in a Ludlam Geiger counter is made in USA. I think they get some governmental preference if a university or government agency buys it. But both Ludlam and Bicron make the same claim. Every part in there is made in USA. Now, when copying the EEPROMs, something like, say, the 2C EEPROM, you start with one that works, an enhanced EEPROM that does work. And you need this disk that's in here to recopy it from the EEPROM onto a floppy disk. Again, it shows how important keeping this disk is. Like the one that I put out on the giveaway table was made with this disk here, KFest 2C. By the way, I also made a few others. I made Obama 2C, but I didn't sell even one. I was thinking of making similar ones with the current leaders in that field, but I skipped it because nobody got that one. Well, okay. Well, that's why I didn't name the current ones. Let's see, here's WAS2C. That should be a popular one. Anyway, so you recopy the contents of it onto a floppy disk. And then when you go to make copies, you put it into the disk reader, and it reads them the other way. But you have to instruct it to read it in the other direction. That's why you got to really hold on to this disk. Don't throw it away. These are some of the 2E disks here. Now this is the opening screen on that disk. You notice it's called Super EEPROM Programmer Card. That's the title I wrote on each of these disks. And let's see, how to use this card. I would recommend, even though you don't yet have this disk, just keep looking for it if you see it anywhere. Take a look at that, because you'll see it's actually pretty complicated, the number of steps that they give you to go through. And that's why I say you really need this disk. If you found the card but had lost the disk, the interface card will not be useful. Let's see, wait, let me skip these two. Yeah, this is contents of the dish. It does give very specific instruction on how to copy the disk. It's all pretty clear, but again, it's a lot of detail, and you just got to follow it line by line, or it will screw up. Maybe you could print this out, and it'd be easier just to follow it on paper. These steps, you know, first you got to read the first half of the ROM in, and then save it, then read the second half of the ROM in. That's the way that this interface card works. Its maximum capacity is 128, and the 2C ROM is 250. This thing I call the Cadillac of EEPROM burners can do the entire thing in one sweep. There it is. Look at that. I paid $400 for this about, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago. But it is just great. It's made in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The company Logical Devices moved to the Denver area now. And you put the master chip here and 8 blanks there. It tests each blank to make sure that they're all empty. You get a red light if there's anything still recorded on the chip. I put that little white mark on there just as emphasis that you have to put the chip in a particular you have to put the notch in a particular direction. These are just buttons for the going through the steps. Another view, I put 2 of them in over there. Here's a view from the top. This is about the only thing you'd call a display, but it says OK. Now, there was somebody selling one identical to this 2 weeks ago on eBay for $125. I paid $400 for mine, and mine is totally paid off probably 3 or 4 times. I sell the EPROMs on eBay for just $12, and I've far exceeded the $400 that I paid for this thing. This guy in Simpsonville, South Carolina, is selling it for $125, but no guarantee, no returns. I told him if I announce this at Kansas Fest, I would read whatever statement that he might write, and I could read it to people here because it looks identical, and it did give the OK up here in his picture. I think that the OK means that everything in the circuitry it probably goes through some kind of self-test every time you turn it on. I would say it's probably 80% chance the thing works perfectly. And then he stopped advertising it about a week ago, so I guess somebody bought it for $125. Oh yeah, let's see, this is the close-up here of the display. 256 means you put the 256K EPROM in. That's the size for the 2C. Notice that they don't use 5 volts. You know, I think we always assume electronics in a computer runs on 5 volts, right? Isn't that what we always assume? They use 12 volts for this particular one. And in the early years of EPROMs, many EPROMs required 3 separate voltages while copying into that EPROM. I guess now it's just 1 voltage for the whole operation. Just another view there, you can see there it says KFest 2C, the master. Look at this. This is an ad. I think if I just told you this, a lot of people would say, more BS out of Buggy or something. Look at this price. Do you see that? $720. Somebody was asking for this. By the way, the guy in South Carolina was selling for $125. He was also adding $60 for shipping. I think this one is free shipping, but still $720 is sky high. Now, you might wonder, how do you customize the content of the EPROM? The one limitation of the Cadillac of EPROM burners is it copies the entire thing, but it has no way to alter the contents of it. The way to customize it, notice I put my own name here on this familiar software. I bet at least half of you use this for copying discs, right? Let's see, copy 2 plus. There is about 15 pages in this called sector editing. And sector editing tells you how to change specific words in what is written. It's kind of focused on written text. I don't think you can edit pictures with this. Never tried it. But what sector editing does, you tell it the words that you want to change. Let's say the words that you want it to find, it will search the entire disk to find them, and then it will stop right at that point. So if it's John Jones, University of Nowhere, it'll search through the entire floppy disk, and then it will show you where on the disk it is. Then you delete all of those words and write in your favored words, and it will write them on the floppy disk. And not only does it write them on the floppy disk, but every time you copy that disk, the new writing will show up. Okay? Now, so to customize your CD-ROMs, like how did I put KFest 2C on? You do exactly that. You create the disk with the wording that you want. By the way, for the heading on the open characters, okay, so if with sector editing, you can do an entire line I'm sure, maybe even more than that. But KFest 2C was under 9 characters, so it worked. Once you've done the sector editing, and by the way, this was something I just picked up upstairs. My favorite of Copy 2 Plus version 9.1, because that's the mouse version of software. Okay.
Even about 3 minutes.
Whoops, okay. Hey, there's the book I just mentioned. You know, there was one of these with that color up there, but I left that one. Okay, I've already got 2 copies. I mean, I'd be hogging the Copy 2 Plus. But if anybody doesn't have Copy 2 Plus and you'd like a photocopy of that section, I do have a photocopier in my house, and I'd be happy to mail you a photocopy of this section. Okay? But the customizing, I think, is limited to text. I just don't know how you can alter illustrations. Yeah, let's see. There is the screen that we just saw a minute ago. That's it. Okay. Any questions, though?
A lot of times with the EEPROMs, like the windows are covered up, right, to avoid accidental erasure. How much risk is there of an EEPROM losing its data just because the window sticker is gone and it's
Oh, yeah.
in your fluorescent lights or your incandescent lights or what have you?
Stephen, can you repeat the question?
Well, I've wondered the same thing, and when I make these EEPROMs, I put on a sticker, and then I usually put a large sticker over the first sticker to give double protection against it. I think as long as it's opaque, it's probably pretty good because there's very little light inside the lid of the computer. If you had anything like, I think it was last year, somebody had brought a 2E where they had a clear plastic case around the whole thing. Something like that, if you didn't have the lid on it, it's going to be exposed to a lot of sunlight. By the way, sunlight will erase EEPROMs too, but I think the figure for sunlight is probably 10 to 20 hours in sunlight, because there's a little bit of ultraviolet in sunlight. I live at high elevation. Gallup, New Mexico is 6,500, so we get more ultraviolet from the sun than you do down here closer to sea level. But yeah, I would always put a sticker over it because that protects it. Oh, by the way, another thing I forgot to mention is that I did another talk about EEPROM chips 8 years ago in 15. And the theme of that talk was Apple II Forever, one of our slogans. And with EEPROM chips, they naturally deteriorate in about 10 to 20 years. Well, of course, if you got a 2C, you know, that's probably 30 to 40 years already. Not all of them deteriorate in the shortest amount of time, but what I recommended in that talk was if you have any other way of storing the contents of the EEPROM chip, say onto a DVD or a CD disc or any other way, try to make copies of it, because then EEPROMs could be recreated out of your recordings of them, and then Apple IIs could go on potentially forever. I mean, that's why I'm giving everybody this disc here in your little packet, is that all you need to do is to get that copy of the EEPROM interface card, and you can create more EEPROMs indefinitely. Okay.
Can I ask one more question? Sorry, just
Oh.
like I have a couple of EEPROM burner cards that I picked up in some computer lots I purchased. I've never used them. Is the software pretty generic typically?
Oh, yeah. The question is the software generic if they're from different manufacturers and at different times? Yeah, there's probably 20 manufacturers that make them, mostly in Taiwan, but throughout the Far East. And I don't think the brand name even matters. I don't think you even have to match the brand name if you have multiple EEPROMs in the same computer, you know, like say the 2E with 4 of them in the 2E. It's just the speed should be matched, that last speed number. If it show, a lot of them don't even show the speed number though, so it's not that crucial of a thing, but to run it smoothly, try to match the speed numbers on it. Okay, let's see, that's it.
All right. Thank you, Stephen.
Say, one more thing. We've lost a lot of potential viewers in here. I made 50 copies of this handout, and I even have the contents make 20 more in case if we had a high attendance. But if you know anybody that had to leave early because they had to get back to work or something, if you want to pick up an extra one, go ahead and do it.
All right. Thank you, Stephen.
Those things I left on the giveaway table, I put limit one per person, but there's plenty of extras of this. Or if you want to even grab a second one because you tend to lose things, go ahead and pick one up.
All right, so let's see, that ends that talk, and so the next one will be at 10:15, so about 6 minutes from now. So see you back here then. Question?
I would nominate Stephen to win the best tie.
Oh, you know, I brought this for the tie contest. If you're here for the first year, we have this outrageous necktie contest, and I think they canceled it this year.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think we had actually had two good ties this year. So Chris, I think you had one, and then
But I nominate Stephen to win.
Steve as well. So round
Well,
of applause there.
If it's a contest with only one entrance.
Okay, he's gonna go get his. All right, we'll show that in a minute. All right, everybody take a quick break, and we'll see you back here in about 5 minutes. All right. Can you check there and see if everybody's in the camera? Are they more? There. All right. Why don't you guys come over a little bit closer? Here, Stephen, turn around so the camera can see. So every year we have a tie contest at Kansas Fest, and this year I'm not participating. So this year we have 3 entries, one of which I don't know. And so everyone, we usually do this by applause-o-meter. So whoever gets the most applause. So let's just go down the line. We'll start with Stephen Buggy here with his tie. Woo! Okay, next we have Jeremy. And Jeremy, what are you going to show us here?
I have a belt. My wife found me this belt. She allows me to come to Kansas Fest every year. Today is our 23rd anniversary.
Wow.
This belt for me.
So this is really the price for her.
Yes.
All right. The belt. And then finally, Chris, what do you have?
So Chris, what I have is, it took me a really hard time with all the transfers and canceled flights on Monday. So these are all actual boarding passes, transfers, requests for upgrades, seat transfers, everything like that. And we've used some of them.
Yes.
This was longer before, but we used them for scrap paper. So this is what I made. I made this on Monday.
Woo!
Actual topical, to get to Kansas Fest required all this.
All right. Wow. I can't really tell. That was kind of a tie, I think, maybe. You guys okay with a 3-way?
Oh, that's a great idea.
3-way tie? All right. Big round of applause thank you so much to everyone. All right. On to the next talk.
I was Roger Wagner.
Oh, that's right. I should point that out. This is the Roger Wagner tie contest. And it was actually kind of funny. One of his funny conditions on donating all of his things to Kansas Fest was that we had to make sure to call it the Roger Wagner tie contest. That was it. All right, so next up we have Oleg Kachenko, and he will be talking about the versatile serial accelerator. And let me just get you wired up. Say something and see.
Testing.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. Today's topic is the versatile serial accelerator. So the goals for it is to use an existing serial port, and my passion from it was from the fact that everybody likes the cuteness and portability factor of 2C and 2C plus, and the fact that they have the two serial ports built in. The GS has a serial port built in, and many Apple IIs for communication with printer, for serial communication with modem, also featured super serial card. That was the most popular. And in the bins for the giveaway, it was probably most prevalent card was a serial. So this is something that is readily available. And another reason is 2C and 2C plus. They lack extensibility, expandability. They don't have ports. Maybe they have a memory port. There is expandability through replacing ROM and CPU, but there's only so much that you can fit there. And it's nice to have something that there is already port from the outside, and you can plug in something and get use of it. So the versatile part is there are some great uses of serial communication for specific purposes, such as printing. Of course, this was probably the most widely used. And of course, modem less so, but before broadband, it was probably
Oh, okay.
asked for. The most recently, the use of serial is ADT and ADT Pro, and not only is it kind of used widely, it also demonstrated that it can perform at a great speed and at a convenience to transfer files. However, those uses are mostly single purpose: printing, communication, storage, or copying files. So the idea of versatile is to repurpose the serial port for different kinds of use with specific purposes that could be used in programs, in applications, in retrofitting. So examples of such use could be the acceleration. So if there is a task which is numerically demanding, we can offload it to an external device that can do it faster for us. There can be specific purposes such as audio, music, maybe internet communication like Usernet that can be repurposed for this device. So the API would consist of two parts. So on Apple II, there would be an MLI assembler or machine language interface, and it could provide libraries for high-level languages such as we'll see for Cayenne Pascal, regular Pascal, because the examples MLI interface to extend Apple Pascal is also possible, and Apple Soft. We've been looking into using ampersand syntax, for example, for that. And on the device itself, it would mirror those certain protocols in text or binary form that would be able to respond to this processing, and would allow to create these accelerators or special purpose programs that would communicate through this such protocol. So where did this motivation come from? So there are some demos on the internet, and the kind of some interesting appealing ones is where there is streaming video or animation close to a streaming video. So the question was, how is it? And there weren't that many that on like not kind of accelerated apples, like more regular apples would run. So the idea was, is it possible to do with a help of such device, and would such device provide such possibility? So here, this is an example of how such animation is done in a straightforward way using AppleSoft. So we have a series of images, which are binary files, and they will be first loaded into the RAM disk. And the target here is more Apple IIe going forward, whereas for the Apple II, Apple II Plus, it could be looked into. So loading into RAM, and the typical animation, which is like a textbook example from producing animation. So the limitation, of course, doing it only on Apple II with a RAM disk, for example. And this is straightforward. This is without any compression. is we load the images to the RAM disk, and then we read them from the RAM disk. So for the purposes of all these demos, to kind of save time, everything runs ×4 speed. So it's like, I would guess, Apple IIc Plus. So of course, if we but of course, it only has 7 frames, and can we provide something of a longer, of a kind of longer duration, of course. And a factor here is that it is loading through a RAM disk. So I also came across and then was able to kind of attest by observation that ADT Pro runs faster, produces, serves files faster, and besides ADT Pro, there is a vDisk where you can hook it up to a server, to an external computer, and it can serve files from an external disk using serial port. And it runs faster than, for example, floppy EMU using a disk interface, because the disk interface in floppy EMU, it preserves the timing, because timing is critical for disk operations, of the original disks, whereas when it runs through serial, it can run noticeably faster. And of course, not only this approach can provide larger, for example, folder of files through which we can cycle through, it can also maybe do it dynamically, like load from somewhere or generate animation that is dynamically generated. So as we talked earlier, the uses of the existing serial ports is printer and communication. Maybe somebody can think of other like go-to uses for serial ports, because I may have missed. So if somebody can think of, but the printer and communication modem is what kind of comes to mind. And if you read the manuals for the super serial card or the 2C, 2C Plus technical reference, that's what the use is. Of course, recently we have ADT and ADT Pro. There is a built-in support for communicating with serial devices in AppleSoft Basic, the peer, and the # is to select a slot. In 2C and 2C Plus, the name for the slots, because there aren't physical slots, they're called ports. But having such interface would already make use of existing built-in firmware or AppleSoft support, for example. And this means for the slot, there is a firmware that is behind it, and like issuing a PR or in pound slot number would call certain initialization procedures in the firmware, which, depending on firmware, there are some interesting discovery paths, which maybe we can talk in the end, that although on the surface they function very similarly between super serial card on like Apple IIe and then the firmware and implementation on 2C and 2C Plus, which both use also ACIA, is the chip which provides the serial communication and exposes full ports and interrupt support. On 2GS, there is apparently a different chip which exposes different registers. Although, if firmware is used, certain functions in the firmware, there are like entry points or hooks in the firmware, like it was mentioned previously, Pascal level functions, that this interface could be used. So There is also a parallel with other platforms that use serial communication as opposed to other extensions like slot extensions or parallel buses or disk interface. The kind of very famous one is Atari SIO, which is a serial port, but it also takes the role of a disk drive. And the original FujiNet is based on Atari, and it makes use of such interface. A Macintosh MIDI interface, so there is an extension that provides MIDI interface to Macintoshes because classic Macs, they did not have expansion slots, such interface, but they did have a serial port, an AppleTalk port. Such MIDI interface would go through a serial port. And of course, the USB is a serial bus. And as I understand, the basis, the origins of USB go back to how Atari SIO was implemented. So it's multiple devices and.
Same team is the ones who wrote it.
Um,
Same guys. The guys who did SIO went and did USB after.
Yeah, there you go. So here's just a quick taste on how support for serial interface looks like in firmware and in AppleSoft. So there are some gotchas that it's an interesting discovery kind of journey that, for example, the Apple for screen, it uses the high bit set ASCII. So it's an ASCII with a high bit set. So it happens that for serial communication, it also uses the high bit set. So in order to, I want to show how a terminal communication would look like. So we had to create our own terminal, or rather adapt a terminal from Python that would have a functionality of both handling the high bit, and also some other features like maybe adding a pause to between lines, right? So if you want, for example, so where this could be used is you can use a serial interface, a serial terminal, or this device, right, where you can load programs or text through like copy pasting or through loading and transmitting using this text-based interface. And if you are doing it directly, for example, to AppleSoft, it takes time to parse each line. So if you are doing it too fast, it won't have enough time to respond. That's why delay between lines is a feature that can be used, for example. So here we have this terminal program, and there is a corresponding terminal program in AppleSoft. I wanted to just give an idea what we're dealing with this interface or firmware interface that is supported by AppleSoft and Super Serial Card. So there is a protocol to set up, because in communications in a serial interface, there are some common settings that need to be set. So most importantly, like when we run it here in Windows, so it's ubiquitous and it's kind of recognizable, is the baud rate, the size of data, 8 bits, 7 bits, there could be 5, 4, but this is the most widely used, 8 bits, no parity, and 1 stop bit. So this is the most used, and that's what we went with. There may be some uses, mostly to tackle the issues in the communication lines. Like you may want to use maybe 7 bits and maybe 2 stop bits. That was one of the workarounds for this high bit. So if you set on one end 8 bits, 1 stop bit, and on the other end you say 7 bits, 2 stop bits, it will kind of mask that high bit in ASCII in Apple. Okay, there is so we are switching here in AppleSoft to the port. So we're using a port slot 2 for, in this case, Apple Win. It emulates a 2E with Super Serial card. In 2C and 2C Plus, there was a slightly different protocol for this. So if you want to support both, there would be a slight adjustment. But the range of commands are similar. So we're selecting the slot using the Control D, which is like communicating with interpreter directly from command line. And then we're using Control A to communicate. So now this port or slot is listening and sending it. Control A is like a command sequence, and it is suffixed with the commands. So 14B happens to be setting the baud rate, and it's just a list of tables, and it starts with like 100, 300, and ends with 19,200. And there is a special rate, which is 115,200 baud, which ADT Pro is using. And then we set the stop bit, the parity, and there are some extra features such as the sending a line feed after carriage return or eating line feed and carriage return. So with 2E, there is a setting to engage the 80-column mode, so this 3S. And then there is this terminal mode. So if you don't go to terminal mode, your AppleSoft input and print statements, they communicate instead of the keyboard and screen, they communicate with the serial card. If you go to the terminal mode, it cuts off AppleSoft and it becomes a mini terminal. So you can use it just to type things and act as log into BBS, for example, and interact with it. So now if we run it, so here is a summary of commands. If we type something, and of course, like backspace would not work. So let's do. Okay, so we type at the basic side and AppleSoft side, and we see it at our terminal. So we notice that after each line, there is 2 lines on the receiving end, right? So let's try to use that interactive Control A. So if we do Control A, it gives us a prompt, and we are doing line feed disable, okay? And now if we type, it doesn't give the carriage return. So, and we can type, of course, to the opposite way. So all information is here. There is a little glitch here. The cursor is, maybe there is another setting. Yeah. So it can type both ways. So that is the kind of the basic terminal communication. So now what we can do, so we will go to our protocol for our device, this VSA, Versatile Serial Accelerator, so where it would sit. So this is a typical diagram from Super Serial Card and serial communication. So we have the 2 ports, port 1 and port 2, or slot 1 and slot 2 typically. That's where on 2E they recommend to insert these communication cards. Typically, the port 2 is reserved for printer, and port 1, sorry, is reserved for printer, and port 2 is reserved for a communication device. And then there are multiple modes inside. How do you want to channel them? Do you want to redirect input? Because you can have peer or in port, right? # port. So depending on that configuration, it could have what they call simplex mode, for example, printer, duplex mode when two sides can communicate simultaneously, or half duplex when they take turns in communicating. So our VSA would take place of this communication device. So this communication device, what they mean here is modem, which would then communicate to a remote system. So in our case, it could be just a self-contained device that can serve whatever it's the protocol and the features that it supports. But it also can go further, and whatever it interfaces, it could be Wi-Fi, internet, or MIDI, for example. So whatever extensibility that it would support, it would go from the communication, but it will handle the protocol that it is agreed upon. So I will go to an example here. So in order to exit this mode, we need to do a Control AR, which is reset. And let me just do a kind of cleaner reboot here. And in the simplest example, so this is our terminal, which we need to exit to free up the port. Mm-hmm.
Control plus your terminal window, make it bigger. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. So here we will have a simple protocol which will start the communication. So this would be a fixed width protocol, a start communication with a 4-character start kind of contraption, and then there would be a request from the Apple side to greet. Our device will send a greeting, hello, or a greeting, and the Apple side will do a thank you and a quit, like an acknowledgement and a quit. So this is a two-way. And in order to do this, we have a call response. Okay, so we again set up our communication, and we're using the regular print and input in BASIC. Due to the echo, right, we need to temporarily switch from port 2 to port 0 when we are reading input. Okay, so we will start with code. It's the wrong terminal. Okay, so this communication happened just now. So the line that was sent was hello world. And this is a clean exit. It's kind of a challenge to make sure that this protocol both ways can keep up and can cleanly exit. So this is an example of kind of fixed width character communication. Sometimes we may need a variable width, or sending longer lines, or we cannot predict what the length of characters we can send. And for that, we have an example with lines. So here, the commands were variable widths. So we have a start, which is 5 characters, and a quit is 4 characters, and we received and sent the communication. And in order to handle that, what we do is we use a terminator. So in that case, the kind of natural terminator is CR, carriage return. So next step, we're going to do something fun. something kind of appealing. The reason why we want to accelerate something is we want something intensely requiring intense calculations. So one of such examples from Apple, and the assumption here is like we're envisioning we are in the 80s, and what would people want to do, and what would such device help them? And the reason why it would be possible will come shortly. So, here we will. So these are a couple of examples. So there is a Bill Budge's 3D system, which was very interesting, and it allowed you create 3D animations. And they were pretty cool, and they were like space shuttles and simple games like missiles and objects, similar to like what Elite is, right? So those kind of things you can create by yourself and make demos and maybe games, so that's like API. So there were a couple of limitations. The amount of transformations that it can do, so most of the rotations were one axis, and the number of planes and points and lines that it could support. There is another example of 3D animation which was done, I don't know if people are familiar, so there is this amazing F-draw line graphics and in general graphics and especially line drawing by Andy McFadden from GitHub. So, and it has this 3D demo, and this is using the library, which is binary, right? But it is called from basic. So this is the speed at which it rotates a cube. So it's a pretty simple 3D shape, but it rotates in one axis, right? It does have this, though, which is nice. So it can reposition. However, if we look at the code, we see this. So in order to rotate that cube, there are two passes in this program. So one pass is calculates all the, I believe it's 16 positions. And because it's a symmetrical cube rotating around one axis, you don't need the 360, you only need 90 degrees. So it's 90 degrees, 16 intermediate positions. And when it says loading at the beginning, what it does, it copies this into RAM. And then from RAM, there is an amazing routine that we're going to be using too, which allows to, given an array in RAM of coordinates and lines, line indexes, to generate it very quickly. However, the points themselves, which is the sine and cosine transform, in order to do the 3D, it's pre-calculated here. Okay, so what we are doing is here next is we are using a basic program which will communicate with our serial accelerator. It's called ColdCube. And here again, we just need to load a ColdCube. So it is a little slower, but what it provides is real-time rotation. So we were not pre-calculating anything. So our engine here, which is in Python for simplicity, but it could be tool of choice C, but Python works quite nicely. And when we talk about what device could play such role, it would fit nicely there too. So what's happening here is interesting. Okay, so what happened is that the way this protocol works is that the cube keeps spinning. If there is new data, this data is updated. So when there is no data, there is just simply no update, and the buffer is populated with the new data. So the command is sent cube and the angle of rotation for the two axes, which is determined by AppleSoft. And then our accelerator calculates the position of the vertices, and the lines are kind of configured already in AppleSoft, and it draws the lines. So the input here is the coordinates, and the plotting is done by simply the hplot in AppleSoft. So this is why it is not demanding on. So if we run the same and we provide acceleration on the Apple side, it will spin faster. So here we see that if the Apple can do things faster, the accelerator will keep up. And this is the reason for this protocol to be a call response, so that after each short exchange, we can synchronize, and if the speed is slower, there is no buffer overruns in this case when we choose the amount of data comparable to be buffered. So in order to speed it up, because we used AppleSoft Basic and input routines, and this is the text format in which the data was sent, so there's parsing. So we will be using a Cayenne Pascal, which is very nice environment, and it's good because it doesn't have opcodes. It excuse me, compiles directly to assembly. It has an optimizer, and it's easy to prototype in it and then replace parts with assembly, and it interfaces with assembly nicely. So we're gonna swap the disks, switch to Pascal. And next, so here how the simple interaction looks between a program in Pascal and our accelerator. So here, a binary data is sent, and this was from a prototype for displaying a single image, and in chunks. And then these are the control sums, CRC basically, sums of the data. And we want to make sure that kind of sanity check that it matches, then the data is processed correctly. So next, I'm going to folder lines, and here I'm going to do TTY cube. In our accelerator, and TTY cube. Let me side by side. So this is the same speed of CPU, so it's like 4 times Apple II, right? So, and compared to basic, so it's basically similar data. So we are transferring vertices, and Pascal generates the whole thing. And you see it is already comparable to the original demo, right? But that demo was fixed. It had only one axis, so here we have 2 axes, and we can do this. So this is an example of interaction. And what happens here is we are sending slightly different, not just the cube command, but slightly different commands like zoom in and zoom out. And besides refreshing the cube, So I have 3 minutes. We also generate the zooming. Next example, Mandelbrot fractals. So the Venerable Bob Bishop, which presented here, published many articles. One of them in 1987, 2 years after fractals came into existence, right? He did this study how with BASIC and with some assembly, with libraries to generate fractals. But if you read the articles, it takes multiple days. If you want to do a low-res animation, set your computer for a weekend, and you will have a nice like 8-frame or 20-frame animation. And he says here, even though each pixel, if you could have several computers, and they were building, I don't know if anybody knows about this, so they were building a supercomputer with 256 6502 microprocessors that run at 3 megahertz. So this idea, and it would have been connected through a slot, but serial slot, I think here is, we show the throughput is non-essential. So this could have been possible in 1987. So let's go to the last demo here, which is okay. So this is a low resolution, but what it allows us to do is we can zoom in. We can, you know, in those fractals, you want to like find a point and see where it ends. And there is, in that article, there is a discussion like how many times you can zoom in, and there is a precision at some point like 30 times resolution. The precision is gonna, but in Python you can load a numeric library and you can go from there. There's another command for reset and it goes back. And last one, because you want to ask a question, right? Okay. And see, it exited cleanly. What was it? Well, it's comparable to the number of pixels that we need to push, but it's not over the weekend, right? And it's a high res. And this is, of course, the Apple is slow, so I'm gonna do a full acceleration here for Apple, and you can see that's already at this magnification. We see those rounded corners. That's where the precision already reaches its capacity on the Python side. Okay, and we can reset to go back. I will just flip through. So for the contest HackerFest, there was a terrain generation, and you will believe me now, right, if I say that it works. So this is a 2D, and it takes like a while, right, many seconds to generate on Apple II. But with our accelerator, it's immediate. And not only we can generate one terrain, we can travel over terrain, and that traveling over terrain happens at about the speed that the cube was rotating. The device itself, So it's kind of envisioned, and maybe it could be a board which starts with P and ends with co, maybe. It could be a potential Soderfest item, right? So it's in the works, and any questions and ideas would be interesting. All right. Thank you. Any maybe quick questions? Where to start? And there will be opportunity in the virtual session, right?
All right, thank you so much. And I think that concludes all of the presentations for Kansas Fest 2023. We're going to take about a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back for the Hackfest announcements. So this is the announcements of the HackFest entries and the winners. So our judges this year were Mark Lemmert. If you want to get into the camera. Yep. And then
Thank you.
Jay
And Jay.
Kraft, which is, he's in the back there. So I want to thank both of them for doing the hard job of going through all the entries and difficult decision making. And both of them are still standing, so I guess there wasn't too big of a fight. And so, Mark, why don't you just take it away and explain everything?
Thank you. Apologize, just bear with me 1 second here. So our contestants were Oleg Konchenko, Jeremy Rand, and Dennis. Thank you. Kovacic, did I get that right? Okay, thank you. So Jeremy's going to start out by showing his entry, and then you guys can show if you want or not, and then we'll announce the winners and do prizes. That's the plan.
Jeremy, do you want the microphone real quick?
Okay, am I on? So all I did was a little simple text mode game. I call it 8-bit blast. You just have to try to destroy the lesser 8-bit computers on the screen. So there's Commodores and Ataris dropping down towards you, and you have to avoid them and shoot them. And
Do you have sound for the game?
yeah,
Okay. Hopefully they'll automatically go to
okay. Let's see. So, and that's all it. Oh, well, I crashed already. So there's lots more Commodores than there are Ataris. They're worth less. Commodores are worth 10, and Ataris are worth 100, like that one. And that's the game. And that's it.
Hold on, you're not giving it justice. Jeremy, you came up with this game after the pizza last night. No, you don't. So you came up with the pizza last night. So he says, after having dinner, he says, oh, you know what? I think I'm going to write a game. So he says, give me an hour. So I put a timer on my phone, and he goes and he starts it for an hour. And after an hour, he goes, oh, I got the things coming down. I can move my guy, but I can't shoot. Give me another hour. I give him another hour. The game's finished. Everything works. But then he says, I want sound. So then 13 minutes later, okay, sound is all in there. And everything. So really something else.
All right. I don't know if everybody heard that, but Chris was just saying that Jeremy wrote that game in essentially, what is it, about 2 hours and 15 minutes? Yeah, yeah. Okay, Mark, sorry.
Thank you. Okay, then Dennis or Oleg, would either of you like to come up and present your entry?
There's nothing really to show for mine, but I posted the disk image on the HackFest channel in Discord if anyone wants to look at it.
Okay, awesome. Dennis was just saying that he posted his entry to the HackFest Discord if anyone wants to take a look at it. And Oleg, would you like to present yours?
So this entry is a terrain generator. So that's the part that runs on the Apple by itself. And so here's the challenges here is to make it runnable, make it reasonably fast. The way it was done is there is a simple kernel that is used, and amazingly, so for terrain generation, if people know that there's special algorithms, you can do terrains, you can do in a similar way, you can do clouds. So, and there is a certain level of complexity. There's like a Wikipedia article how to do it. I have my own algorithm, and one second. Okay. It starts with random numbers, which are spaced three cells apart. And what it does next is it runs the kernel, which consists of 4 cells, and it does in two-dimensional planes, x and y, and it does it a number of times, which is 10. Depends on the level of detail, how much resolution, and how much the resolution of your heights and the resolution of your picture is. And it generates, in a straightforward way, applying this convolution in x and y multiple times. And it produces a fairly decent, we can run a different one, it will generate a different terrain. And in the end here, what we see, if we slice, so the generation happens in a higher resolution. So this is 16 colors, 4 bits. The resolution is 1 byte, 8 bits, and it still generates a terrain. But if we slice these 4 bits inside the byte, we get different level of detail, and that's how you can come from like ebbs and valleys to, if you want to generate clouds where there is like specks, you know, or you can combine them. All right, so that's the terrain generator.
Thank you, Oleg. Okay, so we had a objective, or as objective as we could make it, scoring system for choosing the winners, and each entry was scored on completeness, cleverness, coolness, and how much the participant learned in the course of creating the entry. I want to point out that the scoring was very close with all of them. Well done to you all. And the winner, the first place winner, is Oleg Kopchenko.
Oh, you can come up and stand. Yeah.
The second place winner is Jeremy Rand. And third place winner is Dennis Kovacek. You are all winners and will all receive prizes, first, second, and third place. Chris will show you momentarily what the prizes are you can choose from.
All right, so we have some fabulous prizes this year, and you get to choose. And so we'll make it, Jeremy can choose first, and then Oleg.
Oleg was the first place.
Oh, sorry.
They're not standing in order.
Yeah, you messed me up there. Oleg, and then Jeremy, and Dennis.
In the middle, but second and third on the side.
Oh yeah, true. Okay, so let's see the choices that we have this year. So we have a boxed copy of Noxart KFest. And that's just one of the few boxed ones left. I still have 2 more if anybody wants to take one home. We have the Apple II VGA card from Vince Briel. So there's a few of those. And then finally, we have gift certificates, $50 gift certificates to either 8-Bit Tees, which is Javier's store, or to the some guy CT6502 to his store. So $50 to each of those. And so, Oleg.
I'll go with the Knox.
All right.
Oh, well,
Knox our case to
thank
this.
you.
Part, but I hope that I will learn.
All right. And Jeremy, whichever one of those you would like.
I already bought one of those.
Okay.
So I think it's going to be.
You.
I need a new shirt.
All right. Sounds good. All right. And then Dennis.
I'm going to go for the same thing.
All right. Great. All right. Well, thanks to everyone, especially thanks to Mark and Jay for running it, and congratulations. All right.
Well done, guys.
Of Kansas Fest 2023. So I want to thank everyone for coming out this year, and you know, I think things, as you know, were maybe not quite as smoothly as we hoped in a few ways, but hopefully everybody had a great time. And don't forget that all of the live stream recordings are going to be made into more polished versions of the videos, and those will be up on our YouTube channel. But then we're also going to be streaming many of them next weekend. So our virtual event is the A2 Forever, and there's still time to register for that. Anyone who attended in person, you're automatically registered, and you'll be getting an email with links to join. Anyone who's watching online, if you're not registered, just go to kansasfest.org and you can register for the online event. So again, that's next weekend. I think it's the 29th and the 30th. So more details on the website. And other than that, we will see you in 2024. So thank you.